Charmaine, maybe you can pull up the presentation. Steve, would you like?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Ashwini. Sure. Good evening, everybody. I am Steve McHarris, your city manager. And this is a presentation we gave last week, and we wanted to give it again if we had any new people that were taking a look at the topic, and this will also be recorded. So if anybody wants to look at this later, they'll be able to view this presentation. We have a very important topic here related to the 2020 municipal election and voting changes. We'll also review Measure F and the city's financial health and share the city's financial forecast with you. I think it will really help you understand why the City Council decided to place Measure F on the ballot. And I'm pleased to continue this public engagement and thankful you're taking the time to really think about our budget and related city services. So I hope you'll find the information useful. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ashwini Kantak, our Assistant City Manager.
Thank you, Steve, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time this evening. As Steve mentioned, I'm the Assistant City Manager, and I have with me Walter Rossman, who is our Deputy City Manager, who will walk you through some part of the presentation, as well as Charmaine Angelo, our Public Information Officer. And so we will be presenting some information about the upcoming elections, including some changes to the voting process in this election, and also provide information about Measure F, which is a quarter-cent sales tax measure on your ballot. And our presentation should be about 15-20 minutes, so we will have ample time for Q&A. Next slide, please. So as you know, this election is the first in which all active registered voters will automatically receive a vote by mail ballot for November 3rd, 2020 general election. And ballots can be returned by mail. They must be postmarked if they're returned by mail by November 3rd. And ballots returned at a secure ballot drop box must be deposited by 8 p.m. on November 3rd. Voting locations will be available in all counties for at least 4 days, beginning the Saturday before November 3rd. And voting locations will offer a variety of things, including voter registration, replacement ballots, accessible voting machines, and language assistance. So please go to the Santa Clara County's website to look up this information for drop boxes and voting locations. And then in addition to the presidential election, there are obviously several other measures and elections on your ballot. In terms of local elections and ballot measures, we have the mayor as well as 2 at-large council member seats and local Measure F. Next slide, please. So what is Measure F? On August 4th of this year, Milpitas City Council unanimously placed Measure F on the November 3rd, 2020 ballot. And if adopted by voters, Measure F would enact a quarter-cent local sales tax for 8 years and could guarantee as much as up to $6.5 million annually, and this will be locally controlled funding. This could help address community priorities identified by Milpitas residents and local business owners to maintain both the city's services and also avoid service cuts. As you know, we've all been impacted by COVID-19. And so to keep the high level of services that we provide now, Measure F would be able to generate some revenue towards that. And you can find a lot more information about this measure on the city's website. Next slide, please. So this slide shows you the Measure F question as it appears on your ballot with a yes or no response. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned, if it's approved by voters and the approval is 50+1, revenues from this measure could fund a variety of community priorities such as police, fire, emergency response services, emergency preparedness, improving working environments for our first responders, helping our local businesses, which have been really hit badly during the pandemic, as well as maintaining some critical youth and senior services, and of course, overall maintaining the city's finances. Next slide, please. So these are just some example areas. So in terms of public safety services, Measure F could be used to maintain, as I mentioned, 911 emergency response services for police, fire, as well as paramedics. Could also help maintain neighborhood patrols, hire and retain qualified public safety officers so that we continue to be competitive and provide a good level of service, and also upgrade equipment and tools which are used to respond to public safety emergencies. Next slide, please. Another area, as I mentioned, the services for youth and seniors. And here's some ways that we could help maintain services. So programs for our children and youth, such as after-school programs, day camps, as well as sport and recreation activities. We also could provide youth with places to learn and play after shelter-in-place orders are relaxed, and retain very critical services that serve our seniors, such as a nutrition lunch program, which has actually never stopped and has been more important than ever during the pandemic, as well as other supportive health and transportation services to our senior population. And I'm going to now turn it over to Walter Rossman to walk you through some of the next slides.
Thank you, Srini. Good evening, Walter Rossman. So what you see here is what our general fund revenues are projected to be for the remainder of the fiscal year, just below $100 million. And what you can see is property tax is the most important funding source for us, and sales tax is the second most important one from an amount perspective. You can also see that our revenue portfolio is pretty broad. We have many different sources of revenues, but we do rely most heavily on property tax and sales tax. Next slide, please. Sales tax, which you pay today, is 9%, and what we propose, what Measure F proposes is, if it's approved, the rate will go from 9% to 9.25%. But as you can see, is the city only receives 1 percentage point of the 9%. So if this big pie chart, which you see right here, click please, you see only the city gets a small portion of the actual sales tax, which you're paying today at various places. Next slide, please. One thing I want to mention too is that it's paid on goods and merchandise, but it's not paid for all, just go back please. It's not paid for groceries or a subscription drugs, as well as animal feed and on your utility payments. Next slide, please. So if you look at the sales tax which is generated, it's 50% of all sales tax the city received today is generated from non-residents. So these are residents who come to our malls, especially when they open up again, and it's business to business. And if you can see at the big pie chart, this is the business sector. So you first click, please. It's business to business. It's the first, it's the biggest one. The second one is general retail, and the last one is the county pool. The county pool is the sales tax which is generated when our residents buy something online for Amazon or for other services or online retailers, and it gets then pulled into the county, and we get a share of that. As you can see, the county pool is it's the third largest source for sales tax. Next slide, please. So when we did the forecast on September 1st, unfortunately, due to COVID's impact, our revenues are projected to be lower, but they're projected to be low for the remainder of the 10-year forecast. Primary impact are trends in occupancy tax, slightly sales tax, and you see a shortfall for this fiscal, which is projected to $50 million, and the next fiscal $11 million. But ongoing, you see pretty much a $9 million impact throughout the 10-year forecast. Next slide, please. So what that means is, in this forecast, that our sources, that's the revenues, are constantly not sufficient to pay for the expenditures. So click, please. What you see, we have a $9 million structural deficit throughout the entire forecast period. Next slide, please.
You want me to cover this, Walter?
That would be great, please. Thanks, Shweta.
Okay, thank you, Walter. So as I mentioned earlier, Measure F is a quarter cent sales tax measure, but for a limited period of time, so 8-year sunset clause. The cost to the taxpayer, the additional cost would be about a penny for every $4 purchase in the city. And according to city reports, right now, the way our sales tax numbers work out, approximately half of the cost would be borne by out-of-town visitors to Milpitas. As you know, we have a lot of restaurants as well as the Great Mall. So there's several people from outside the city that do come and spend their money in Milpitas and pay sales tax. Also, based on this study and prior sales tax estimates, the average household in our city will pay approximately $140 in additional sales tax per year, or approximately about $12 per month. And Measure F, as Walter mentioned, would not apply to prescription medication or groceries. There are also accountability provisions in the measure. It calls for citizen oversight. And actually at the October 6th City Council meeting, our council already approved the responsibilities of a Measure F oversight committee in case the measure is approved by voters. Additionally, there will be annual financial audits as well as public disclosure of funding. So to give everybody a level of comfort with the accountability that will be associated with the measure. Also, by law, all Measure F funds will remain local and can only expend it within the city of Milpitas. Next slide, please. So again, just in closing, wanted to remind everyone that you can vote by mail, drop off your ballot at a drop-off location. We have one at City Hall, or go to the voting center location to vote. And we're now available to take your questions. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. And go ahead. We have our first question from Urvish Kumar Mehta.
Thank you very much. Good evening to city staff, assistant city manager, deputy city manager, as well as city manager. I wanted to thank you for the more elaborative presentation. That's many aspects that's been covered. I just wanted to ask that whether there is any consideration to have a non-profit organization services to be included as well. Because as per my understanding, the city of Milpitas partnership for the round of non-profit services and providing food as well as other medical resources that with some of the non-profit organization that's been completed. So just wanted to see that whether that's something going to be a part of inclusion or not.
Mr. Mehta, I just want to make sure I understand your question correctly. So when you say inclusion, just in terms of providing services, partnering with nonprofits, or is it specific to the sales tax measure?
Specific to the sales tax measure, whether the nonprofit organizations are also included in that?
Depending on what they're buying. And Walter, maybe you can clarify.
Sure. So depending of the nonprofits pay taxes, sales taxes like everybody else when they purchase goods, and except for again prescription drugs and food. But I'm wondering, do you mean a part of the oversight committee, or that's how I understood your question? But maybe I'm off base.
Well, it is more reference with the food distribution. My understanding is that Deputy City Manager Walter, is that, sir, that during the round of a pandemic, there were distributions, that was scheduled and conducted by a non-profit organization. So if they are going to be providing the services my understanding is that they will be also be the sales tax will be applicable to the nonprofit organizations as well, right?
If indeed, let's say they buy food in from restaurants, that would be taxed, or if they buy hot prepared foods from a supermarket, that will be taxed. That's correct. But if they buy regular groceries in a supermarket, it would not be taxed. And this is not really in our control. The sales tax law is a state law, and we have to be consistent with state law as sales tax is applied. And the information is collected by the state and then redistributed to the city.
Okay. Just to add to that conversation, because the nonprofit organization that's been helping out with the food distribution, they are helping the seniors as well as youth, and as well as the through a different distribution food programs as well. And they were in a partnership with the city of Milpitas for providing those services. So my understanding was that of a more that if they are part of a business to business services, then I think that's something they will also be included into the sales tax as well. That's what I was trying to refer to. But thank you. I think I understood that and if they are going to be purchasing anything from the supermarket, they would be the sales tax would be applicable to them as well.
Depending what the purchase is, correct. And for business to business, mainly applies to manufacturing. So if one company buys from another company certain products, that's when business to business comes into play, not for services.
Okay. Thank you very much. So when we say services, so any partner, so from a city perspective, if the partnership with the nonprofit organization is solely based upon the federal or state government funding, then that would not be inclusive of a sales tax?
That is correct. So if they provide a service where they get a grant, no sales tax will be applied. If they buy something with the grant funds, then indeed, depending on what the purchase, there will be sales tax applied.
Sure. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any more questions from attendees. So at this point, I think we can conclude the meeting.
Right. As I mentioned, the meeting's recorded, so it'll be available for playback. So if Irvish or anybody else paying attention is logged in or logged out of this meeting, they'll be able to review the recorded.
Yes, and we have some viewers who are watching us through live stream as well. So please contact us if you have any questions. We have a lot of information on the elections and Measure F on our website, and also contact information for us. So please feel free to reach out if you have questions. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you and have a good evening.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.